The sharp crack of plastic shattering cut through my quiet Tuesday like a rifle report. It was 6:15 a.m., the sky still navy blue at the edges. The air cool enough to make my coffee steam as I opened the front door. What I saw would have been funny if it had not been my driveway and my mess. A pearl white Escalade was accelerating away from my curb, its rear bumper scraping the asphalt and tossing sparks like a cheap July firework. My trash can lay in pieces. Coffee grounds, cereal boxes, and a banana peel draped my front tire like mockery. I am Marcus Holloway, 45, a licensed electrician for 22 years, recently divorced, fighting for joint custody of my two teenagers, Emma at 16 and Tyler at 14. We live in Pinewood Gardens, a suburban Ohio HOA where lawns are supposed to be exactly 2.5 inches tall. Mailboxes come in 3 approved colors. The newsletter reads like a cross between a garden club memo and a traffic court docket. I bought our corner lot house 3 years ago when the divorce papers were still drying. I picked it because the schools were solid, the sidewalks were safe, and the kids could have their own rooms. What I did not pick was a neighbor named Brenda Whitmore. Brenda is 52, a widow, retired from managing a bank downtown, and the self-appointed compliance officer, a title that does not exist in our bylaws, but lives in her head like a crown. She is friends with the HOA president, Gerald Thornfield, which grants her useful immunity. She drives a pearl white Escalade the size of a fishing boat, wears a navy blazer like it is armor, and knows every line of the rules that help her and none that help anyone else. Geography matters in this story. My corner lot means Tuesday collection places my bin near the street within 3 feet of the curb by city ordinance. That zone also happens to be the path Brenda prefers for her daily power walk and pre-work joyride at exactly 6:15 a.m. the first time my can shattered. I chalked it up to narrow streets and big vehicles. I spent 20 minutes cleaning while diesel exhaust hung in the morning air, and my kids watched their dad pick coffee filters off the driveway in pajamas. Then it happened again, and again. 4 times in a week, always at the same minute. Always with the same rumble, crunch, and squeal. Mrs. Olivia, 80, who lives across the street and drinks tea in her front room as faithfully as church, confirmed my suspicion. She takes the long way around on purpose, Mrs. Olivia told me in careful English. Plenty of room on the other side, but she drives close to your can every time. I tried diplomacy. I caught Brenda during her afternoon patrol and said, calm and civil, I think there is a problem with my trash can and your route. She smiled without warmth. Marcus, you are new to community living? These streets were designed for normal-sized vehicles, not oversized containers blocking traffic flow. Perhaps you should consider placement timing adjustments. Placement timing adjustments sounded like a bureaucratic poem. The city's truck arrives when it arrives. The ordinance says my can must be within 3 feet of the curb on collection day, visible to the driver. So I did what electricians do when a code does not match behavior. I researched the rules, and I documented the reality. I read the municipal code, the county standards, and our HOA bylaws. The city requires curbside placement on collection day within the 3-foot zone. The HOA's jurisdiction ends at the property line. The right-of-way belongs to the public, not the HOA. That distinction matters like a breaker matters to a live panel. Meanwhile, I replaced trash cans. For in a month, $92 total. The drama stressed my kids. Emma asked why the neighbor was doing this, and Tyler asked if we would have to move again. The custody evaluator made notes about neighborhood conflict. I kept quiet because proof was better than anger. I installed a doorbell camera angled to see curb and street. Cost me $47 in a few minutes with a drill. I printed the ordinance and taped it inside a folder labeled trash. I asked Mrs. Olivia to write what she had seen, and her hand shook as she signed, because she is kind and does not like trouble. Then I waited. The can shattered twice more that week. Each time the video captured everything. The same minute, the same gentle swerve toward my can, though an entire lane sat open. The same pearl white paint in the frame as the lid popped like a snapped bone. I brought the footage to the monthly board meeting. The community center smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and coffee that had been heated too many times. 12 homeowners showed up, a record by Pinewood standards, which tells you how bored people typically are with HOA business. Brenda sat at the board table in her navy blazer, a binder stacked with printed bylaws beside her water cup. President Thornfield adjusted his tie every 30 seconds like it was strangling him. When the agenda turned to old business, I stood and read the city ordinance out loud, calm and clear. I showed the survey line that marked my curb and right-of-way. I played the clips of the Escalade's morning habit. Then I set down a letter from a property rights attorney named Amanda Sterling, who had handled HOA cases for years and had written, in plain English, that the HOA cannot regulate trash placement on a public right-of-way. Brenda's hands trembled when she reached for her glass. President Thornfield coughed and said they would study the matter and table it for more review. Translation: they had nothing to stand on. We filed out into the parking lot where the security lights hummed. Brenda intercepted me. "You think you were so smart?" she hissed, loud enough for the dozen homeowners nearby to hear. "People like you come into decent neighborhoods and think rules do not apply." That line floated in the humid air with a stink I knew too well from my divorce. It's a kind of coded contempt that sounds like standards and smells like prejudice. I had my phone recording in my shirt pocket because I had learned faster than I wanted to that documentation is armor. That night, Emma asked why the mean lady hated us, and Tyler asked whether we would still get Pizza Friday if the HOA fined us. I promised them I would handle it. Then I went back to the codes because bullies fold under two pressures: sunlight and evidence. The next morning, the Escalade slowed almost to a crawl at my corner. I watched from the window and sipped coffee. The pattern had shifted, which meant the next move would not be subtle. The game had started. November arrived like a cold slap, and so did Brenda's second act. The certified letter showed up on a Friday at 10 a.m., heavy paper, legal tone, and the smell of fresh printer ink. Improper trash receptacle placement creating traffic hazard, it read, citing Section 4.7. 3 of the HOA rules. A section I could not find in any version of our bylaws, which did not surprise me. A deadline followed, 72 hours to remedy or face $50 per day in fines. I knew the board had tabled my complaint 3 nights earlier, so the timing looked like a rush job. The letter felt like a threat printed on nice paper. I called the city permit office and spoke to Dave, a guy I had wired 3 remodels for and who knows my work is clean. He chuckled sadly. "Marcus, we received 4 complaints about your dangerous corner at 2:47 a.m. All within 15 minutes, all claiming to be different witnesses, all clearly written by the same person. Either you have a neighborhood full of insomniacs with identical grammar, or someone is padding the record." I spent that weekend doing what a contractor does before an inspection. I built a binder. Page 1 held the city ordinance that requires placement within 3 feet of the curb on collection day. Page 2 held a photo of my can precisely within that zone, with a tape measure across the concrete. Page 3 held a copy of the HOA map showing jurisdiction ends at the property line. Page 4 held a note from Amanda Sterling, explaining that the HOA cannot regulate public right-of-way. Page 5 held Mrs. Olivia's signed statement. The rest of the binder held dates, times, photos, and a log of each strike, including one clip where the Escalade driver actually made eye contact with my door camera before swerving. On Nextdoor, the neighborhood social app, Brenda started a narrative. Reckless homeowner endangering traffic. Hazardous corner obstacles. Think of the children. 3 of her most loyal allies chimed in with concerned trolling commentary about standards and safety. Everyone else shrugged digitally or said gently that maybe the person whose can keeps getting hit is not the problem. I noticed something important as I scrolled. Her posts kept drifting into property values and the kind of people who do not understand community expectations. My daughter watched me read and asked if we were that kind of people. I told her we are the kind who read the rules and follow them. Tuesday night was the board meeting part 2. The audience larger than the first because people talk when drama gets interesting. I stood when old business came back around. I presented the ordinance again and the videos again. Then I mentioned casually that I had consulted a property rights attorney. Amanda found the selective enforcement patterns particularly interesting, I added. And her firm has handled similar cases against HOAs in Ohio. President Thornfield swallowed and said, This requires further review, and I saw Brenda's jaw tense. Outside, under the buzzing lights, Brenda lost the last of her calm, announcing to anyone within earshot that people like me did not respect standards. Mrs. Rodriguez from Maple Street gasped. Jim Torres, the maintenance guy, stared at his keys. I kept my phone steady in my pocket, capturing her every word. The next morning, the violation blitz began. I received notices for grass height at 2.75 inches, which apparently exceeded the 2.5-inch maximum by a scandalous quarter-inch. I received a notice that my mailbox had faded from heritage blue to unauthorized weathered navy. I received a notice for 3 tiny tears in my window screens, tears so small you would need a magnifying glass to see them. Each carried a $50 fine and a 10-day payment deadline. The goal was simple: make me flinch or drain me dry. I spent Saturday with a tape measure and a camera, walking the neighborhood like a census worker with better shoes. I documented 14 properties with grass higher than mine. I photographed President Thornfield's mailbox, which had faded to roughly the same color as mine. Half of Maple Street had screened tears from the summer hail. I printed everything and submitted a formal complaint about selective and discriminatory enforcement. Bureaucracies hate paperwork that turns their own systems against them, and I was now fluent in their language. While Brenda was writing fines like parking tickets on Black Friday, I visited the contractor desk at Home Depot and ran into Dale Kowalski. Dale has poured concrete for 23 years and has opinions about everything that touches a trowel. I told him about my trash can. He stirred sugar into coffee with a paint stick and grinned. City Code does not care what your can is made of, Dale said. Plastic, metal, concrete. As long as it holds garbage, meets size limits, and sits where the city wants it on collection day, you are legal. That conversation planted a seed like wet cement in my brain. I bought 60 pounds of concrete mix, a length of steel rebar, a standard plastic shell, and a handful of drainage plugs. I sketched a plan on cardboard. Hollow base for weight distribution, rebar cage to stop impact deformation, drain holes to prevent water accumulation, exterior appearance identical to every other bin on the block. From the outside, it would look like the same old can. On the inside, it would be a steel-reinforced lesson in physics. Before I mixed a bag, I handled the harassment campaign. I filed the selective enforcement complaint, referencing the Fair Housing Act's prohibition on discriminatory patterns in community standards enforcement. I summarized my findings. Over the previous 12 months, Brenda had issued 67 violation notices. 49 targeted single parents, elderly residents, or minorities. 18 targeted married couples or long-time homeowners. I did not need to write the word discriminatory to make the point. The numbers did it for me. I attached photos of every comparable violation she ignored. I copied President Thornfield, the management company, and, for good measure, the city's general counsel email inbox. Then I went to work in the garage. The smell of concrete mix hit a memory button from the year my dad and I poured our basement floor. Emma and Tyler helped, stirring water into powder with a garden hoe, while classic rock played on a paint-splattered radio. We set the rebar cage inside the shell, poured, tamped, and leveled. I drilled drainage holes and seated plugs. I sanded the rim so the lid would fit like any other. The exterior was scuffed just enough to look like a normal bin that had seen a few winters. It weighed about 60 pounds, heavy enough to matter, not so heavy that the garbage crew would notice when they used the arm to tilt it. Monday at 6 a.m., I rolled the can to the curb, exactly within 3 feet, exactly where it always sat. At 6:15 a.m., I watched from the kitchen window with a coffee mug warming my hands. The Escalade came around the corner. Brenda slowed, studied the can, and then hit it at her usual 15 miles per hour. The sound was different. Not a brittle crunch, but a deep thunk, followed by the screech of metal, meeting something that did not want to move. Her running board bent. My can wobbled and settled. She sat there for 30 seconds, confused by a world that was not behaving, then tried again from another angle. More metal noise, less plastic noise. I sipped coffee. This time, the damage was hers. The law had not changed. My can had. That afternoon, I mowed precisely 2.5 inches. repainted the mailbox heritage blue, and patched the window screens. I printed receipts and logged the maintenance with photos because paper wins were bluster fails. Over the next 4 days, Brenda tried 4 more times. Each attempt rattled her SUV and left the can unbothered except for scuffs that made it look more ordinary. By Friday, her Escalade wore about $800 of new scars. The neighborhood noticed. The story grew legs and sneakers. Kids at the bus stop started timing her morning approach like a track event. Parents watched through blinds and traded texts. For the first time since September, I laughed at my own curb. When a bully cannot win by force, she graduates to paperwork and prowling. I woke on a Tuesday when my phone buzzed with a doorbell camera. Alert at 12:38 a.m., the frame showed a figure in a blazer and flats, a flashlight beam bobbing at the curb. Mrs. Olivia called the next morning to confirm what the video suggested. She tried to weigh your can, Mrs. Olivia whispered as if the phone had ears. A bathroom scale. She rolled it next to the bin and pushed. She is not well. I laughed despite myself, then made a note that my neighbor had sneaked onto my property to weigh my garbage can. Trespass is trespass, even when it wears a blazer. That afternoon, a building inspector named Pete knocked, clipboard under his arm and apologetic eyes. Ma'am filed a complaint about unauthorized concrete structures on residential property, said, reading from a sheet like a script. I led him to the curb. Pete tapped the can and shook his head in half a minute. It is a trash container, not a foundation. No permits required. No violations present. I have seen people build entire sheds without this much scrutiny. He smiled and left. The next letter came from the HOA, demanding immediate access to my yard for compliance verification of exterior modifications. It asked for permission to inspect safety of the trash receptacle and any recent structural changes to my home. I'd spent hours reading case law about HOA authority and the Fourth Amendment after the first violation letter, which means I was ready. I wrote a polite refusal that cited the general principle from cases like the Narot decision, where courts held that HOAs cannot conduct fishing expeditions on private property without specific cause or emergency. I agreed to allow public sidewalk inspection only. If they wanted more, they could obtain a court order. The smell of Brenda's frustration was almost as good as the smell of new concrete. Meanwhile, her Escalade degraded from showroom to cautionary tale. The running board hung at an angle like a broken wing. The front bumper spiderwebbed. The right headlight housing rattled audibly. Every morning she made one more attempt, and every morning my can did what concrete does. It refused to care. At the hardware store, Jim Torres, our maintenance guy, told me she had cornered him to ask about concrete purchases. She was interrogating contractors and checking receipts, searching for proof that I had built a weapon. In truth, I had built a container that did not break when hit. The weapon was her impatience. The community mood shifted. During my Saturday grocery run, I overheard neighbors call her the woman who keeps hitting the same trash can. Emma reported that classmates asked if we were the concrete can family. Tyler suggested we sell tickets to the morning show for $5 and fund his college. And I told him entrepreneurship runs in the family, but we do not charge admission for other people's mistakes. The most important change came from Patricia Lopez, one of the only reasonable board members. She pulled me aside at a community event and whispered what she had seen behind the scenes. Brenda was pushing for enhanced enforcement authority, surprise property inspections, material restrictions, and even contractor background checks. Patricia also flagged something that sounded like money. Brenda kept pushing maintenance contracts with a company no one recognized. Every budget meeting came with a draft bid package ready to approve. That night, after the kids went to bed, I opened the state business registry and the city's public contract database. I typed Whitmore and stared at the results. Whitmore Construction LLC formed 6 months earlier. Listed Brenda as a 40% owner and a man named Richard as president. The HOA had awarded 7 maintenance contracts in 4 months, totaling $23,400. On each bid, Whitmore Construction had undercut competitors by exactly $50 to $100. A pattern too consistent to be chance. Meeting minutes showed Brenda voting to approve each contract. 7 votes, 7 approvals, 7 checks paid from homeowners to her family business. That violates basic fiduciary duty standards under nonprofit law, and it violates common sense. I collected business filings, meeting minutes, contract award sheets, and bank statement summaries from circulated financials. I highlighted the timeline. My first polite question at a board meeting about why our maintenance budget had jumped. September 3rd, Brenda's first collision with my can that I witnessed. September 15th, the harassment began 12 days after I asked a budget question. The concrete can was not her real problem. The real problem was a homeowner looking at numbers. I compiled everything and sent it to Attorney Amanda with a subject line that read, "Urgent. Potential criminal exposure." I also made 3 digital backups and printed 2 sets, because paper has a way of disappearing when thieves sense a flashlight. The next morning, collision attempt number 53 separated her headlight housing from the bumper until it dangled like a loose tooth. My can wore a scuff that looked like character. For the first time in months, I was thinking less about garbage and more about justice. Brenda believed she was fighting a divorced electrician over a curb. She was about to discover she had picked a fight with her own paper trail. Tuesday night, my garage became a war room. I cleared workbenches, pulled out folding tables, and taped timeline strips across a concrete wall like a general preparing a campaign. The guests of honor arrived at 7 p.m. on the dot. Mrs. Olivia came with jasmine tea and courage. Jim Torres arrived with a tool belt, an eye for detail, and a quiet shake of his head that signaled, enough is enough. Patricia Lopez brought budget binders and a look that mixed anger with relief now that someone else had seen what she had seen. Dale Kowalski arrived last with donuts, coffee, and a grin that made me think of an uncle who loves mischief. I laid out the evidence. $23,400 in suspect contracts. 7 undisclosed conflicts of interest. 47 documented harassment incidents, counting collisions and letters. A vehicle that now looked like a case study in poor impulse control. Patricia whistled when she saw the bank deposit pattern. "I knew something was wrong," she said. Every time I asked, Brenda had a script and a spreadsheet. Jim tapped the bumper photo with a thumb. "That alignment is done. She is going to eat tires every 1,000 miles until she fixes it." Yorkin turned her car into a tuition payment for patience. We divided roles because complex problems need layered solutions. Jim would monitor retaliation attempts and file immediate incident reports. Mrs. Olivia would coordinate door-to-door outreach and gather signatures for an audit petition. Patricia would lobby other board members for a formal vote to freeze spending and call an independent audit. Dale would serve as technical consultant on construction items and document the trash can's compliance with city specs. My job was to be the public face of a private truth. Amanda sent a legal plan by email that read like a circuit diagram. Step 1. Harassment complaints supported by witness statements, timestamps, and video. Step 2. Civil claim for property damage and stalking. Step 3. Formal demand for an independent financial audit and removal of conflicted board members. Step 4. Referral of insurance fraud evidence and contract documentation to the State Attorney General and the County Prosecutor. She attached an Ohio case summary on HOA fiduciary duty that made my contractor's heart sing. There is a special joy in official language that says, in essence, you cannot steal and call it community service. Community organizing started Wednesday morning. I knocked on doors with a packet of proof and a calm voice. "We are not trying to blow up the neighborhood," I told everyone who answered. "We are trying to fix it." By Friday night, we had 18 signatures supporting property rights protections, 34 signatures demanding an audit, and 12 people willing to speak at the next board meeting. Mrs. Rodriguez had been ready to slam the door until she saw the contract totals. 5 minutes later, she signed both petitions and muttered Spanish that would have required bleeping on television. Media takes preparation, so I prepared it like a bid package. Channel 7's investigative reporter Sarah Kim had covered HOA messes across the metro. I sent her a clean press kit, not a rant. It included a simple timeline, the contracts chart, quotes from attorney Amanda, and a 12-minute video of Brenda's greatest hits. The private Facebook group called Pinewood Gardens Transparency went from 0 to 67 members in 4 days. Neighbors posted photos of old notices Brenda had written them, and new violations only she seemed to see. Someone stitched a montage of collision clips to circus music, and it spread like lawn gossip in the spring. Meanwhile, my can kept doing what concrete does. It refused to participate in other people's drama. Collision 54 added a bend in the lower bumper. Collision 55 loosened a fog light. By Collision 56, the Escalade looked like a before picture at a body shop. On Sunday, Patricia pulled me aside at church and whispered that the board would vote. Tuesday, on emergency contract approvals Brenda had placed on the agenda after the audit petition began circulating. The items included sidewalk repairs and planter replacements, all routed through Whitmore Construction with bids that once again beat competitors by exactly $50 to $100. I wrote a concise letter to the board reminding them of fiduciary duties and conflict of interest, disclosure requirements under state law. I attached the contracts chart, highlighted Brenda's ownership stake, and asked for a public explanation of the bid process. I copied our management company in the city's general counsel inbox again. Brenda must have felt the ground move, because Monday morning, a new form of harassment arrived. A private security firm began slow rolling in front of my house at odd hours. Jim recognized the company name and told me Brenda was paying $200 per day for surveillance on a trash can. My own camera saw them, and that was fine. If they wanted to film my curb, they could enjoy a masterclass in lawful compliance. Wednesday turned ugly. Emma overheard Brenda telling a parent at school pickup that certain households were bad influences. Emma is smart and strong, but she is 16, and it hurt. That evening, I hired Beth Morrison, a retired police detective who specializes in harassment documentation. For $200 per day, we now had professional eyes on, Brenda stalking, and a report writer who speaks fluent prosecutor. On Friday, Tyler slid from under my work truck holding a small black device with blinking lights and a magnet. "Dad," he said, trying to sound calm, "what is this?" "A GPS tracker." I photographed it, removed it carefully, and brought it to the police. Officer Derek Martinez took the report and said what I already knew. This is not a neighborhood dispute anymore. This is criminal. At the same time, State Farm opened an insurance claim Brenda had filed for $3,200 in road hazard damage, which my video promptly disproved. The investigator denied the claim, referred it to the fraud unit, and asked for copies of all footage. The pressure cooker hissed. By Sunday evening, everything had a date, a witness, a number, or a statute attached. The board meeting was set for Tuesday at 6 p.m. Channel 7 confirmed they would attend. We had 118 neighbors committed to showing up and 17 ready to speak. The dominoes were lined up. All that remained was gravity. The day of the meeting, Brenda tried one last gambit. President Thornfield called an emergency closed-door session at 2 o'clock p.m. to discuss liability concerns and community safety issues. Patricia texted me from inside. Harold Masterson, the HOA attorney, looked like a man who had spent the morning telling a client that facts are not optional. Someone had backdated conflict of interest disclosure forms for Whitmore Construction. Unfortunately for them, email timestamps and meeting minutes are stubborn. At 4 p.m., Brenda filed an emergency restraining order petition accusing me of threats, supported by badly edited recordings, staged photos, and witness statements from fictional people. Judge Patricia Williams dismissed it on filing, noting that false evidence is contempt, and this was a warning. At 5:30 p.m., the community center parking lot looked like a county fair. Channel 7 rolled up, followed by Channel 12 and a reporter from the Metro Weekly. Cars lined Maple Street, neighbors carried folding chairs, and teenagers pointed phone cameras toward the door like they were waiting for a celebrity to trip. Inside, 118 residents crammed into a room built for 40. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The coffee tasted like duty. Brenda walked in wearing black, her lawyer whispering in her ear, her eyes darting like a cornered animal. President Thornfield adjusted his tie until it looked like a white flag. I wheeled in my trash can, now a local legend, as Exhibit A, The symbolism was not subtle. It sat beside the podium like a granite witness with a plastic lid. Gerald called the meeting to order with a voice that cracked. The attorney tried to begin with a speech about frivolous complaints, but Mrs. Olivia stood and asked in careful English, which one of us had been committing insurance fraud and embezzling money. Applause broke the tension. Gerald conceded the floor to public comment. I carried presentation boards like a contractor carries a blueprint. I introduced myself without adjectives. Then I laid out the facts. 57 collisions documented in high definition. The GPS tracker removed from my truck. Midnight spray paint captured by security cameras. The insurance claim filed as road hazard and denied as fraud. I clicked to the contract slide. 7 HOA maintenance contracts, totaling $23,400, awarded to Whitmore Construction LLC, owned 40% by Brenda. Approved by votes that included Brenda, violations of state nonprofit fiduciary law. I presented the bid pattern, the $50 to $100 undercuts that smell like coordination. I presented the audit petition with 34 signatures and asked for a vote to freeze spending and hire an independent CPA. Then I played 12 minutes of collision clips. The room gasped, winced, and then laughed in short, shocked bursts as the Escalade hit and hit and hit, and my can refused to move. I turned to Brenda. You have spent thousands of dollars on lawyers and repairs. You stalked my family, vandalized my property, filed a fraudulent insurance claim, and tried to weaponize this board. The worst damage in this room is not to a vehicle. It is to trust. The evidence shows $47,000 in questionable payments routed from our dues to your family. The room erupted. People who had been grumbling about dues finally saw where the money went. Mrs. Rodriguez shouted in Spanish that would melt paint. Teenagers clapped like they were at a pep rally. Brenda stood and screamed that we did not understand property values or community standards, and that she had built this neighborhood. Her voice went shrill and then uglier. She pointed at Mrs. Olivia and said something about certain elements ruining the community. Channel 7 captured every word. The attorney tried to calm her, but she grabbed my boards and tried to rip them. Jim and 2 others gently intervened. That is when Officer Martinez walked in carrying a folder. Sorry to interrupt, he said, but I have a warrant to serve regarding insurance fraud and stalking. The room fell silent. Brenda's color drained. The attorney whispered. Gerald looked ready to faint. Patricia stood and moved a motion. Suspend Brenda Whitmore from the board pending criminal investigation and order an independent audit. 4-0, unanimous. The police escorted Brenda out as cameras clicked. People cheered. It was not pretty, but it was honest. The aftermath moved quickly because paper beats bluster when it is in the hands of people who finally care. Brenda resigned 2 days later by email, citing a hostile environment. The district attorney filed a fraud charge that carried up to 6 months in jail and a $5,000 fine. The state suspended Whitmore Construction's contractor certificate and opened a case for bid irregularities. The emergency audit by a CPA firm recovered $47,000 in overcharges and questionable payments. By Christmas, every homeowner received a $370 refund check. A sweet envelope that made even the most cynical neighbor smile. My civil case settled for $12,500 without a trial. The settlement acknowledged property damage, harassment, and attorney fees. Richard Whitmore called to apologize and said they were leaving the state. I wished him better judgment. The board transformed faster than a remodel on a deadline. Patricia won a special election for president with unanimous support. The board adopted real transparency policies. Monthly financials appeared online. Bids were public. Conflicts had to be disclosed before votes. An owner finance committee formed to review large expenses. The first reformed project was a playground renovation funded entirely by recovered money. Emma and Tyler helped choose equipment, and I watched them laugh on swings that our neighborhood had paid for once, not twice. Holloway v. Pinewood Gardens HOA ended up cited in 12 property rights cases across the state. The legislature passed an HOA Accountability Act that required audit procedures and heightened conflict of interest disclosures for boards. Channel 7's Series 1, a regional award for municipal corruption reporting. Sarah Kim still calls me when a new HOA story needs a homeowner who can explain how a breaker trips when the load exceeds capacity, and how boards trip when accountability finally lands. The concrete can lives in the community center lobby now, plaque and all. Property rights protected 2023, the brass reads. Contractors asked to see it. New residents hear the story during orientation. Every September, we hold concrete can days with barbecue competitions, a kids' bike parade, and a workshop called Know Your Rights. Last year, 800 people came from 3 neighboring developments. We turned our trauma into a festival that tastes like brisket and relief. I used part of the settlement to start the Marcus Holloway Property Rights Scholarship. For students have used it already. Emma wrote her college essay about fighting corruption with concrete evidence and got into 3 journalism programs. Tyler runs a channel called Suburban Justice, where he interviews homeowners about their fights with petty tyrants and interviews lawyers who explain how to win without losing your cool. The custody evaluator wrote that my children had watched their father choose legal channels over rage and had learned that standing up, documented and prepared, beats surrender or violence. My business grew because project managers appreciate a contractor who knows codes and keeps records. Turns out methodical problem-solving works for rewiring buildings and for rewiring broken governance. Sometimes David beats Goliath when David shows up with a sling. 5 smooth stones, a binder, a working camera, and a 60-pound steel-reinforced container. If someone keeps trying to sell your dignity for the price of a plastic bin, pour a better container and pour a better case. Drop a comment with where you are watching from and your worst HOA story. Subscribe if you like seeing the little guy win with preparation, patience, and perfect timing. Justice tastes best when served concrete cold with community on your side.